Welcome, my achievement hunters and collectible gatherers. This is episode 5 of the Complete Critique series, where I pick apart some of your favorite games to see where they excel, or maybe even where they fail. For today's episode, we are setting sail for the distant seas of Concordia. With Mario and Luigi Brothership being developed by Acquire rather than Alpha Dream, rest in peace those guys, I was curious to see how it would fare. Also, just so you guys are aware, this is surprisingly my first Mario and Luigi game, so bear in mind that I do not have the previous games to compare it to, for better or for worse. For all I know, this game could have changed all the best parts of previous entries, using discount necromancy to superficially revive the series. I hope that's not the case, though. And who could possibly forget IGN that, as per usual, charged straight in Leroy Jenkins style with what I can only define as a hot take review of their own. But I'm sorry to say, friends, a shame really, but I kind of agree with a lot of what IGN's review had to say about the game. To a certain degree, I mean. Do not misunderstand, I refuse to believe this game is only a 5 out of 10. Regardless, I truly do think it could have heavily improved in many areas, so let's talk about it. Today, we will be critiquing 8 adventurous categories for the bros clad in overalls. These, of course, being storyline, gameplay, characters, enemies, locations, aesthetic, music, and content. Without further ado, let's completely critique Mario and Luigi Brothership. Halt, weary traveler! This is an analysis and not just some layman's review. Meaning there will be plenty of spoilungas ahead. You have been warned. If I judged the first half of the game against the second half, I would have 2 completely separate ratings. Just understand that the game's story is quite difficult to pinpoint on how well it's managed. I guess first things first, I want to highlight some positives. Mario and Luigi Brothership nailed the heartfelt, lighthearted message of forming bonds between people. After all, connections are the key theme of its narrative. During the course of the playthrough, you'll encounter the dynamics between family, friends, lovers, rivals, and so many more. The game just feels like it has that slow burn slice of life kind of storytelling in the beginning, and the resulting payoff was well worth the investment by the end. Though I should probably stress that that was in hindsight. Yeah, the first part of the game, I'm not gonna lie, was kind of a letdown. Not a letdown in the sense of, oh my god, I hate my life, why am I playing this game? It was more of just it being painfully average at best, up until around, I would say, the 3rd sea you visit. There were great moments, sure, but also plenty of drawn-out or hand-holdy sequences that left much to be desired. Everything, and I mean everything, in the beginning was just far too slow. The first hours of the game are plagued by an overly simple premise, abundant throwaway dialogue, sluggish gameplay, and insanely spaced out upgrades. Take for example the bros attacks, special moves you obtain throughout the game. You finally get your first set of these attacks after the 3rd island is reconnected. Mind you, each of these islands takes between 30 minutes to an hour to complete, depending on how much you're interacting with the NPCs or exploring or whatever else. This meant that I only got my first abilities in the game, apart from your basic attacks, about 3 hours into the game. On top of that, one of these so-called basic attacks, the hammer, is also locked 2 hours into the game. Now I bet you're wondering, how does the gameplay relate to the storyline? Well, it meant I was restricted to only using my jumping moves for the first couple hours of the game. And when the gameplay in an RPG drags, you tend to focus on other, hopefully more interesting aspects of the game. And I know RPGs can take a bit to actually finally kick off and get started, but normally they have something that grips you, you know? Not in... Okay, that could have been worded better, but you know what I'm saying, okay? Unfortunately, at this point, the story was not one of the interesting features. Its narrative did gradually improve in both its complexity and enjoyability as the game progressed, which obviously made me become increasingly invested. And by the final third, after doing the wedding sequence and meeting Bowser, I was thoroughly enjoying my time with the game, for sure. At that point, all the side characters began having a larger relevance to the main plot, and everything was beginning to come together. Suddenly, all these characters that previously had separate, unrelated plot lines were interacting with each other constantly. Their stories began to coincide and created a feeling of community. And before I knew it, we were on our way to take down Zake and finally restore Concordia to its prior perfection. All that stood between me and home was Connie's corrupted mentor, Zocket. I just needed to defeat her and... What followed was the greatest disappointment in the game. The awakening of Reclusa is not at all a bad idea. In fact, it could have been an extremely memorable second phase to an already remarkable final boss. If it had been executed well, I probably wouldn't even have discussed pacing as a major issue. But this was just insulting. So you're telling me Brothership forces you to flee the final boss, backtrack to collect 6 additional freaking MacGuffins, and then return to fight the final boss after a brand new lengthy dungeon? Hey, I'm not done talking yet, because holy shit, this isn't even the first time this game does this. What the fuck? After beating Glombowser, for instance, the exact same situation occurs, where you beat one boss, ready to fight the next, but denied, come back later. Even after your first meeting with Bowser, it ends with you getting launched into the ocean by the big guy himself just to wake up on a drifting island. It's these abrupt interruptions that just totally kicked me out from the experience and left me sitting there like, what was the point in all of this? Because let me tell you, I loved Conductor Island and that whole entire section where you meet the great conductor himself. But when it's preceded by a fake-out boss encounter, it just feels unearned. And don't get me started on the whole bond collecting portion that could have been cut entirely and I wouldn't have batted an eye. I bet this comes across as highly negative, and it is. But it's negative because I want to love the hell out of this game. I want to shout, Mario and Luigi is back, baby! Because it is, and that's exciting. But this is precisely the reason I decided to save the best moment for last. The glimmering rainbow after the storm. The solitary and its dreamscape. So just take a moment and peep this.
Whoa! Wow! Let's go! Ah! Mario! Wow! Eh? Mamma mia!
Yeah, I was not expecting this degree of tone shifting from the game. When we went from lighthearted fluff to serious plot progression, that was to be expected. It's a Mario RPG after all. But going from that to meta horror, now that was unforeseen. Would meta horror even really be the right term though? I mean, the TV shuts off, there are bugs and glitches galore, and characters kind of start popping in whenever they feel like it. Hell, at one point I'm pretty sure Reclusa DDLC's Bowser out of existence. Sadly, the moment was kind of soured a bit by pacing issues of its own, dragging on a little too long. I mean, I think you have to follow and catch Reclusa like 6 or 7 times. I feel like they could have cut that down by half and I would have still gotten the point. The entire Mushroom Kingdom sequence was genuinely astonishing to play through, like literally the furthest thing I would have ever expected. Also, I should include that Brothership was peak from here on out. A pretty thrilling final boss with 3 phases, followed by a credit scene that honestly got me all up in my feels. It was during said credits that I realized something. IGN was right! Shit! A hard disagree with the game being a 5, but they weren't crazy off the mark. Brothership's narrative is slow burn in the beginning, with a hefty payoff if you stick it out. Its lighthearted story of bonds, paired with the wholesome character interactions, make for a wonderful experience in my book. To top it off, there is that whole simulation portion of the game which came so far out of left field, it's a foul! It had a leisurely first half, and even when the plot did pick up, it had a plethora of other pacing issues such as forced interruptions. Additionally, the game went on about 10 hours longer than necessary, which was even more insulting when it made you believe that Zocket was the final obstacle. All in all, I'd say Mario and Luigi Brothership has a decent storyline rating of 7 out of 10. Not great, but not bad at all. Okay, now on to the second most important part of an RPG, the gameplay. You can have a good story, characters, or whatever else, but if your 50+ hour game has poorly implemented mechanics, I will cry. Luckily, that's not the case here. I think the combat found here was actually one of the best parts of Brothership, though it is after you get past the slow beginning part of the game, as it contains really simple mechanics at the start. At any rate, battling felt awesome. Moves, especially the powerful bros attacks, were amazing in both input and presentation. They have pretty solid animation and felt super satisfying to pull off perfectly. Getting an excellent after Conductor Connector or even Bomb Derby early on is so rewarding. Outside of combat, both Mario and Luigi can equip their own gear that can provide stat changes and special effects. There is a whole lot of variation in how you mix and match, but I found myself using the same pieces of equipment for the majority of the second half of the game without swapping at all. Brothership also introduced the new battle plug system, and this is where a lot of in-game strategy comes from. There are plugs for attacking, stat boosting, and healing, along with tons of random ones sprinkled in between. A few of the heavy hitters that I absolutely adored was Countdown to Cure, which fully heals you after 15 turns goes by. There were many moments where I would purposefully time my turns to heal when things looked dire. Protectus was another nifty battle plug that negates 3 instances of damage before running out. And you can probably guess why that's kinda crazy. Then, best of all, the peakest of peak pluggery. Seedalize. I mean, come on, a battle plug that turns enemies into cannon fodder, what's not to love? And if those knocked off your socks already, hurry up and put them back on because you see nothing yet. Battle plugs aren't simply solitary abilities, as they can actually synergize, creating a whole new host of effects on enemies. But beware, you're not the only one inflicting status effects in these battles, enemies can too. The classics are all here, such as Burn, Freeze, Dizzy, and Trip. And Brothership designed a new status ailment too for this game specifically, which is Glom. When one of your bros becomes glommed, they are physically unable to make contact with the other. They just kind of sit there all down in the dumps, and it's kind of sad to look at. But even worse than that, no contact means no combos, no bros attacks, and worst of all, no Luigi logic. Oh, I haven't talked about Luigi logic yet, have I? Well, it's another new addition in Brothership, and I love it! Luigi, using a whopping 11% of his brain, can conjure up the most unorthodox, outside-of-the-box, and often heinous plans to take down foes. This action leads to a specialized minigame that, if done right, can exploit a boss's weakness, daze them for a moment, or just deal fat damage. An additional side effect is that now the phrase, "leave it to me," brings me tremendous terror.
I'm a-coming.
Please, Luigi, have some mercy.
Leave
I
it
have
to
a
me.
family, a wife, and kids. Please, I'll get you the money soon. Just leave us alone.
No. Oh, I got it.
Wow, who's that sad sack? What were we doing? Oh yeah, Luigi logic. It turns out that Luigi's Giga Brain isn't merely constrained to boss fights, you close-minded fool. It also appears frequently in the overworld. Reached a dead end with no way forward? Green Mario's on the job. Do you require the assistance of Solid Snake? No problem for Ouija. Is there an overweight child stuck in a doorway? Let him take the L. Or maybe someone didn't tell you that they were bringing a secret weapon. That's Mama Luigi to you, Mario! Real talk though, these were a blast and often left me quite speechless with the insane methods Luigi would use to solve problems. Even so, I did have some minor gripes here too, and that's that the animation that plays during Luigi logic is just too lengthy for how often it appears, which becomes noticeable from the already poor pacing. On top of those, I also enjoyed the other overworld puzzles as well. Mario and Luigi can learn various exploration abilities called Bros moves across their journey. Using these, you can hover over gaps, roll around as a morph ball, or shoot plasmids all willy-nilly. These each have their own upgrades as well, which help keep exploration novel. The UFO spin gains vacuuming, the bro ball can eventually boost around, or fire and ice becomes a literal spirit bomb. Yet, there were still some parts of Brothership's gameplay that rubbed me the wrong way. I already explained how new attacks and abilities were spaced a little too far apart early game. I feel like that was likely to accommodate for the length of Brothership compared to previous entries, but it still kinda sucked. Another slight gripe I had with combat was the lack of item variety, but also the abundance of what few items there was. There are 21 battle items in the game, with most simply being different tiers of the same item. For example, mushrooms have a normal, super, ultra, and max variant. Anyways, the reason that I bring this up is because out of those 21 battle items, only a single one is non-curative. Maybe I am just biased towards Paper Marios and other RPGs that have attack, stat, curative, and many more types of items. Additionally, the game showered me in what little items were present. I don't think I even had to purchase a single one-up mushroom throughout the entire game because my inventory was stacked at all times. Crafting and fishing didn't help either, instead just exasperating the issue as they were both just underutilized and filled my inventory with even more junk. It can be basically simplified into having too much of a good thing to be a bad thing. The last gameplay addition in Brothership I want to discuss was boat navigation. If Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks had a baby, this is probably what it would look like. And people hated those. So, yeah. Okay, maybe it wasn't that bad, but holy hell did navigation go at a snail's pace. Twiddling my thumbs while waiting for the next stop was not quite my idea of fun. For some reason. And to add insult to injury, what infuriated me the most was that this game actually does have fast travel, but not until the final stretch of the game right before facing off against Zocket. And it's worth noting that at that point in the game, you already have all of the islands connected, so it still isn't even very useful. Now, putting all these factors together, let's see how the rating fares. Mario and Luigi Brothership has truly satisfying gameplay with plenty of strategy revolving around attacks, gear, and battle plugs. Luigi Logic was also a very welcome addition, making our favorite green plumber that much more lovable in the process. I also loved how Bros moves fit in with overworld exploration and puzzling. But I also had minor grievances with mechanics such as crafting and fishing, which basically added nothing to the game. On top of that, the game was just far too generous with items, resulting in me never once needing to restock on anything. Then, possibly my least favorite thing in the game, sailing the 7 seas. Navigating shipshape could have been so much more than what we were offered. Still, a majority of these complaints are not actually real issues and hardly affect the experience at large. Therefore, Mario and Luigi Brothership easily earns a gameplay rating of 9 out of 10. And next up, characters. The cast of Brothership could be considered one of its most compelling components. The various residents of Concordia are an incredibly colorful bunch just bursting with personality. You meet normal people like Connie or Buddy, but also eccentric characters such as the Extension Corps or Technicky, the latter of which, should I remind you, strapped 4 children onto a rocket and launched it into a massive wall. Hey Technicky, I heard you came up with an ingenious plan while I was gone. Oh, Technicky learned comedy. So, what's the actual plan? Wait, you weren't being serious. It should also be noted that everyone you meet in-game is a pretty shallow character lore-wise.
But Hunter, what about Connie carving her own path, Irene becoming a dependable leader, and any other personal growth in the game?
And to that I say, what about it? I'm sorry, these character arcs are cute and make for some good moments, but you have to admit that they are all really simple. Like, wow, good job, Technicky, you went from attempted murder to working with everyone else on the team. I'm so proud of you. Obviously, this is a joke, but let's consider the Extension Corps, who literally went from the big bads of the story to reluctant allies by the end. That's a pretty big change in affiliation, right? Well, their change of heart literally boils down to, yeah, being bad got our asses kicked, so we're gonna do good from now on. I didn't expect Disco Elysium levels of writing, it's just that Brothership's characters might not be smarter than a 5th grader, to put it lightly. Characters in the game can easily be identified by their tropes or bits. Diode loves grooving, Daphne's obsessed with Luigi and being a genius, and Snellet is not a pig, goddammit! But while on their own these characters aren't anything special, I still believe their shared moments were presented amazingly. Irene views Peach as a role model and goes on to learn from her example. Bowser Jr. and Buddy get plenty of sweet moments that show how opposing ideals can affect a friendship. Bowser was another great character / antagonist, as always. In Brothership, we get to see both his silly and badass side throughout the story. And Peach was the opposite. We do not really get to see her at all. Honestly, this is a real shame since for once the poor girl finally wasn't kidnapped. Like, I mean it, outside of small bits here and there, she's mainly just exploring with Idol off screen, so yeah, sorry Peach, you don't really get any screen time. Then there is Mario and Luigi, who by far, like by an entire wormhole, have the best moments in the game. Granted, the game is named after them and even chooses the word Brothership, so they better be the stars of the show. I'm not even lying when I say I could probably write an entire 500-page novel on why Luigi is indeed best girl.
Luigi? Luigi! Mario! Mario! Oh! Luigi? Luigi? Mario! Luigi! Oh boy. Whoa. Let's go. Oh yeah.
From the leads to the side characters to the villains, Brothership delivered when it came to a diverse and lovable cast. They might have been static characters with about as much depth as a chest with a wand of sparking, but I loved them nonetheless. Though I must state again that it really sucked that Peach was robbed of her chance to shine. That poor girl. I think the character rating for Brothership belongs in the same general area as the storyline. A nice 7 out of 10. They were sweet, but nothing groundbreaking. Alright, for this category, I'm gonna crunch some numbers, so whip out your calculator, kids. We're going back to 3rd grade math. If arithmetic scares you, click off this video. Wait, I'm just kidding. Don't leave. And there they go. Ah, damn it. And also a quick heads up that I got my numbers from the wiki, so if my math ends up being wrong, I blame the internet. Heh, a foolproof plan. Anyways, let's begin. There are 77 regular enemies along with 17 bosses. Hey, that's a pretty decent lineup of foes, huh? Well, here comes Hunter to 100% shatter your dreams. First, let's take a closer look at regular enemies. Of these 77 mobs, 12 are elite versions of the base ones, and an additional 26 are glommed variants. What this leaves behind is 39 unique enemies, but even then, this total doesn't account for enemy similarity. Take, for example, the Hammer, Fire, or Ice Bros that are just the exact same guy with different weapons. Or what about Ice Heads and Magmads, which are literally just elemental swaps of each other. And that's just your regular foes. Now on to the 17 bosses of the game. Though not as bad, 5 of Brothership's bosses are glommed variants of pre-existing fights. Of these, only Glombowser manages to feel like any more than just a beefed up version of the previous boss. Additionally, X and Shun share a boss fight, so I would not really count them as separate, but for whatever reason, only 10 has his own individual battle. So even if we count Glombowser as different enough, that still drops the total of unique bosses down to 12. I hope that we are both beginning to realize the same thing. Hey, this leaves only about half the original enemy roster. Splendid answer, my good friend. Here is a cookie. The enemy diversity here might have been acceptable for a smaller game, but not a 40-hour plus experience. When I get to a late game area and it's just the same enemies I've been fighting, but now with increased health and damage, it's disappointing to say the least. Alright, enough with the negativity. Get out of here! Ha! Oops. Well, on to the next topic, I suppose. When it came to actual mechanical soundness, I do think the enemies and bosses were pretty good for the most part. Regardless of how aesthetically uninteresting the Glom bosses were, you have to admit these guys presented some decent challenge. That I could easily tank with my abundance of items, but we've already covered that to death. This was primarily due to the Glom status effect, which made managing my paired attacks much harder. There were a few other bosses that also stood out above the rest. The Extension Core is actually kind of competent and can use battle plugs, much like our beloved bros. The Great Conductor asks players to memorize how Mario and Luigi behave, such as choosing the correct idle animation. This was actually exhilarating because the game is rewarding me for understanding how these guys move, their little quirks and everything. Failing to do so was another story.
Mario!
In disregarding everything that comes after the fight, Zocket is a fantastic final boss.
Oh, hell no!
She has the Glom mechanic, but is also just a tough fight in general. Breaking your bro out of her mind control was thematically and mechanically perfect. Then there was Reclusa, who, at least during my playthrough, was an underwhelming final boss for how much he was built up to be. I just straight up steamrolled this poor guy. Though I can definitely see how people might have struggled against him if they weren't as loaded as I was, so I can't really hold that against him too much. So the game has competent enemies and thrilling bosses, all with neat base designs to boot. Although they weren't that formidable on most occasions, my few game overs came from both of Bowser's fights and Zocket. More so, a sizable chunk of the enemy roster were rehashed, uninspired, and tankier variants with identical attack patterns. This of course resulted in a lack of enemy variation to compensate for the length of the game. It's a crying shame, but I have to give Brothership's mediocre roster an enemy rating of 5 out of 10. Mediocrity carried over to the locations as well. Hey, bad! Put the pitchforks down. I know the islands look aesthetically pleasing. My issue is the exact same as I had with the enemies. Quality visuals just tacked onto generic concepts. Lush Green Sea consists of Rumbla Island, which is pretty unique, I'll give it that, but also a jungle, a forest, and a meadow.
Oh, but Hunter, that's just the first area. Those are always plain.
First off, wrong. Look at Nier Automata's Abandoned Factory or Dead Space 2's Titan Station if you want a good first level. Second, the other seas aren't much better. The third area, Burning Sea, has an island of fire, ice, night, fire and ice, and then a lighthouse themed around even more fire and ice. And absolutely none of these put any unique spin on these classic biomes. Furthermore, the Great Lighthouse boss dungeons were all too similar. Between them, they shared the same old factory theme, soundtrack, and atmosphere. It never felt like I was exploring an entirely new dungeon. I'd go as far to say that even the islands that did have their own identities still clung on to tired out tropes. Merry-Go Island is a standard maze, Offenden Island consists of a ton of ruins, and Conductor Island is literally just a tropical remote island. Lot of coins and Jellyfish Island were honestly great though, so good for them. To put this in my perspective, you ever play Super Mario Galaxy? That game has a forest, desert, beach, and even a fire and ice area. Mario staples. And you want to know what these locations do that make them so much better? They went beyond the environmental stereotypes. In Galaxy, the forest was completely bee-themed. The desert had tornadoes and sandslides, and the beach had fucking penguins. Or, for a pretty basic comparison, look at how Freeze Flame combined their fire and ice. And these were just the galaxies that borrowed standard themes, never mind the others that were completely original ideas. All that aside, Brothership and Galaxy did share one thing in common: an ever-changing hub. Shipshape was done well. I like Shipshape. It evolves as new gadgets are introduced, gains new residents over time to talk to, and changes as new shops or mechanics are also added on. It ties in excellently with the game's theme of bonds. You start with a small little community, and then it grows and grows and grows until you're just like, why are there all these people on my ship? Get off! And you already know I thoroughly enjoyed exploring the Solitary. Now this is a final dungeon. Step aside, industrialization. Nature's here to take over. The Solitary contains many of the game's best puzzles and puts to use all of the abilities and knowledge that you have acquired up to that point. And add on to that the False Mushroom Kingdom sequence, which creates an overly idealistic setting to enhance its creepiness factor. And mechanically speaking, I have nothing against the islands. They all have their own merits, with many goodies and secret areas to discover. It was a little disheartening though to find out that almost nothing changes upon revisits to islands. During sea navigation, you can also find these little islets that act as sub-areas to seek out. These were often home to additional loot or minigames. They were fine. The numerous islands of Brothership have pleasing designs and much to find on a first run through. Unfortunately, these very designs adhered strictly to classic formulas with little innovation to see. Only Shipshape, the Solitary, and a small selection of other islands were able to carve out an identity for themselves. Brothership's assortment of drifting islands failed to catch my eye overall, leaving them with a passing location rating of 5 out of 10. Now, I bet you've probably noticed a pattern of what I've been praising regardless of category. Of course, this is the art direction. If I do so say myself, I believe that Brothership actually made an outstanding transition into 3D. Locations are vibrant and colorful, which harmonizes with the game's prominent theme of connections, though it isn't afraid to include darker, more sinister tones within areas such as the Solitary or Great Lighthouses. The vivid colors paired along with the shading just makes everything pop, so even if the islands played it safe with their thematics, running around never felt lifeless or boring. Another massive dub I definitely noticed in Brothership was expressivity. The reason that character interactions were so great in the game was their expressions, reactions, and emotions within each conversation. All the other in-game animations were pretty great as well. Take Mario and Luigi's battle and idle animations, for example. And while on the topic of combat, Bros moves have gorgeous cutscenes to go along with them. These are so over the top and turn the whimsiness up to 11. My personal favorites are Collectible Blow, which might just very well be a JoJo reference, Conductor Connector for the raw power it exudes, and Jump Helmet. What's so special about Jump Helmet's animation? Nothing much, it just has Luigi being a cutie patootie. That is all. And there's no way I could discuss the art in this game if I wasn't talking about the cutscenes themselves. These were phenomenal, no complaints here. The direction, animation, and music for grand moments struck that perfect sweet spot that made me forget about any of the game's shortcomings. For an example, here's the first time you spot Bowser in Concordia. It properly encapsulates the threat he poses. And let me reiterate that this is your first time seeing this guy since the opening cutscene of the game. Now that got me hyped. Actually, you know, thinking about it now, Bowser might have had a better build-up and payoff than the actual two final bosses. I guess there's just no way to hate my goat Bowser. Alright, I don't know about everyone else, but everything being themed around electricity was quite endearing. Like characters having outlet features, Extension Core being an assortment of electronics, or Zaka just wearing a literal pair of wire cutters. Oh, and can't forget about Reclusa having a TV for a face. That might count. Then there are the clever names, such as Wattnist, Zocket, or even Snoutlet himself. Or in combat, there are battle plugs, which are literally just plugs you snap into a power strip to gain abilities. These are all just so charming! However, even within all this bursting character, the Concordians were one stylistic choice I kinda felt iffy on. On one hand, I did mean it when I said that it lends a sense of cohesion that they all have an outlet theme. All hailing from the same region and whatnot, I feel like this makes sense. On the other hand, this is just Toads all over again. Sure, they aren't actually Toads, but I mean, come on, are they that different? Whoa, this one has sunglasses. And look at that guy over there, he's got a little leaf on his head. How silly. Aw, even this one over here looks kind of like Luigi.
Woo. Huh?
This is very well personal preference, but I like when my RPGs have a little variety in their NPCs and not just this copy-paste, change the color design. I won't hold it against Brothership too much because, I mean, they are just working with a single race of people. I just got a tad bored of their simple designs by the halfway mark, that's all. The primary characters are fine though, and I could easily tell them all apart, from Techniki's big-ass goggles to Idle's matching outfits. I especially love how Mario and Luigi's new clothes kind of blend from their classic red or green into a sort of blue, a tiny detail that I can appreciate. And let me shout it from the rooftops once more that I do hold unoriginality against the locations, but I've already exhausted that topic enough. Nevertheless, the game's art style was generally great. Beautiful, albeit uninspired landscapes, expressive characters, and outstanding animations and cutscenes. Although I wasn't too terribly fond of the Concordians' blocky, boring designs. Brothership had an excellent transition into 3D, polishing itself an aesthetic rating of 9 out of 10. Ah, the soundtrack. Where to begin? It was good, like the type of good when someone asks how your visit to the doctor was. You just sit there and remember the needles. Or in layman's terms, I like it. Thumbs up, gold star, free cake. The islands all had groovy music to accompany their separate motifs. These were all representative of their respective themes and all around pretty pleasant to listen to. Even songs that I hated initially grew on me as I explored the island at length. I arrived at Twisty Island, heard this, and thought I was gonna lose my mind after exactly 22 minutes and 17 seconds of exploring. But then it decided to hit me with... And numerous islands did this, where I think it's going to be unremarkable music at best, but then gets slapped across the face by bangers. The battle, mid-boss, and boss themes all had me jamming as I wiped creatures off the face of the planet. Regrettably though, they had one major glaring issue, being that they play for every single one of those individual encounters. It doesn't matter if it's your first island or your last, if it's an ice biome or a desert. You will be hearing the same battle themes throughout the entire runtime of the game. What? I thought you said you liked the themes. Please, no more. No. And this grew from a slight annoyance into a literal crime by the time I reached Zocket. Now, I don't know who it was, but some genius made the bum-ass decision to have the most critical boss of the game share a theme with a fucking bipedal barrel. It's so incredibly jarring because at this point you think you're at the final boss. You think your journey's almost over, and then they hit you with Boss Battle Theme 1. Then by the time you get to the actual final boss, Reclusa, he has 3 whole individual themes. I'm all for final bosses having multiple themes for each of their phases, but if it means that every other boss in the game shares the exact same theme, hell no! Another small gripe I have with the music are the moments when it pops up right after an emotional or tense moment. Yeah, sure, we must do something about that fortress, she says as the jolliest shit you'll ever hear plays in the background. My immersion was left in tatters every time the music rebounded from menacing back to lighthearted in the span of a black screen transition. Cutscenes themselves had some solid music to back them up though. I got no qualms there. So yes, Brothership has great music. Hideki Sakamoto did a wonderful job, and I'm excited to see what's in store for future Mario and Luigi games. Assuming we get more, which I hope we will. Typically, islands had music that matched their thematics. Battles had powerful pieces that got me amped up, and cutscenes were often joined by a composition that kept me emotionally invested. Alas, the very battle music that I had appreciated became increasingly stale with every encounter as I yearned for a new battle theme of any kind. When even climactic battles such as Bowser or Zocket get the same theme as any other boss, it diminishes the gravity of the fight. The game also gave me musical whiplash occasionally by dropping the intense music in favor of lighter ones the moment a cutscene ends. Considering both the good and the not so good, Brothership receives an adequate music rating of 7 out of 10. Mario and Luigi Brothership is not just a revival of the series, but might also very well be its longest entry. Its scale is the size of the sea and took me around 60 hours to 100%. Luckily, this is due to there being loads of varied content to engage with throughout your journey to save Concordia. The most prevalent non-essential feature you'll come across are side quests. A pretty sizable proportion of these are your typical fetch or challenge quests, but there are also numerous story ones that help build characters. Bowser, for example, has a fun mission where you can check up on the poor guy after the clobbering you gave him. This was funny, and let's be honest, any moment with Bowser is a plus. I also really liked Techniki's side quests that help her overcome her and a Daphne's strained relationship. Though, if I were to pick a favorite, it would probably be Cosette's Decision. This quest becomes available soon after Reclusa sprouts the mind-controlling flowers and Cosette slips away from the island. You can find her at the 4th Great Lighthouse and learn that she left to atone for her misdeeds as Zocket by soloing Reclusa. You gotta give props to Cosette here. It's not often that a side character wants to bitch slap the final boss. While brief, it was delightful to finally get insight into the thoughts of someone who had spent most of the game as an antagonist. Additionally, challenges in the game, as in these medals here specifically, were gratifying to complete and offered some long-term goals to strive for. These require you to get 30 excellence on every bros attack, defeat specified amounts of each type of enemy, earn lots of money, or just straight up deal massive damage in a single instance. The challenges were typically unobtrusive, with me completing them naturally throughout the game, except for one outlier: do it yourself. And no, I'm not telling you to research for yourself which challenge is the biggest pain in the ass. I mean, its name is literally just do it yourself. And to be completely honest, I don't even understand the point of this challenge. The objective here is to dispatch 300 enemies without any gear equipped, which is dumb because why would I want to avoid a major game mechanic like that? The moment I saw this challenge, I completed it very early on in the game, but I can imagine how it'd probably be annoying as hell if left unattended until last minute. On top of that, Brothership has a bunch of collectibles to, well, collect. And if you know me, you know I love me some good old collectibles. First are sprite bulbs, which are always available on your map and basically impossible to miss. These guys can be used in crafting battle plugs, so they are actually quite helpful to collect. A majority of the game's battle plugs are craftable through the menu, or just naturally acquired through story progression. However, there were 2 obtainable through side quests, which was neat. Anti-Glom Specialist is a reward for beating Glom Goblik, whereas Seedalize comes from a trading quest line. A part of me wishes there were more optional battle plugs in the game, but it's fine as it is. Then, during ocean exploration, still hate it, there are reefs that can be discovered using Shipshape's cannon. You don't really launch over to these statues or anything, and they just serve to be nice callbacks to previous games. These are pretty cool, but I should remind you that this is my first Mario and Luigi game, so I didn't have any significant connection to any of these characters, though I imagine it would be really cool for fans of the series. Now, what I did like was that discovering a reef at sea would lead to a miniature sculpture of it appearing on Shipshape. That friend is right up my alley. While exploring islands, you can also pluck these freaky vegetables, aptly named Grampy turnips. And you know what? Fuck these senile crops. Not for any legitimate reasons, but because their jokes aren't funny in any way. Honestly, the punchlines are basically non-existent, and they just keep yelling at me. What did I do? But I'd be lying if I said that I didn't laugh when I saw the last 8 out of 18 crammed into a hidden room in the final dungeon. I spent half the damn game trying to figure out how in the hell I missed so many. Then when I realized Brothership simply threw them all into a single room, I lost it. Going in a totally different direction, did anyone really care about the branching choices in Brothership? They seemed to have little to no impact within the game and were just there. That time when we could choose between Luigi or Peach for that one infiltration, sending Peach was just objectively the better choice. Sending Luigi boots him from the party temporarily, which means missing out on XP and support from him, as you'll be all alone as Mario until he's rescued. And that right there is the only choice that I can think actually does anything. Other choices such as build it versus make it were just purely cosmetic. The last content related bit I want to touch on was the mini games. Yeah, these sucked. They ranged from decent at best, such as the pizza making minigame, to self-implosion levels of frustrating. This stupid poser of a game is Hammer Rally. And one challenge of Hammer Rally requires you to hit the ball 100 consecutive times, which sounds easy at first. But trust me, it was likely the hardest thing I had to do the entire game. Though it should be stated that this is completely optional and can be easily skipped. But I'm stubborn, so like hell this game was gonna best me. In most cases, the minigames simply felt monotonous. Examples of these are the Brother Groove and Connect Our Flower Blooming minigames. Not bad on their own, but when I have to repeat each of these minigames over 5 times throughout the game, they get boring fast. With the abundance of stuff to do, Brothership's runtime can extend a good 10 to 20 hours just from extra content alone, which I was totally fine with. Side quests, challenges, and collectibles were engaging and gave me activities to do in between story beats. Grampy turnips were a tiny bit questionable, but I'll let them slide. They're at retirement age for goodness sake. Although I did not vibe with the minigames, and many came off as repetitive or just a waste of time. Furthermore, choice events in the game were tacked on with little to absolutely no noticeable changes between them. Whether Whether it's fun or not, Brothership has much to do and rightfully earns a content rating of 7 out of 10. And so, Mario and Luigi Brothership has finally been completely critiqued. Well, here are the total scores for the game. I must stress that each rating does not necessarily determine the game's overall quality, since preferences can vary greatly between individuals. Brothership is a revival under new management, so playing it safe is a relatively good decision on Acquire's part. As for IGN, they brought up some valid points such as ocean navigation being poorly implemented and islands being thematically and visually generic. I even partly found myself sharing their sentiments towards Concordians looking a tad bit dull. However, and that's a big however, I refuse to believe that Brothership is even close to a disappointing revival of the Mario and Luigi series. This new entry was far from perfect, but unlike IGN, I believe it was even further from being a failure by any means. And despite some of my scoring, it's actually quite the contrary. I find myself excited and looking forward to what's in store for our daringly dynamic duo. Also, if you enjoy this series, please consider subscribing, turning on notifications, and most importantly, tuning into the next one. It would be 100% appreciated. And please, let me know if there was anything I missed, or something you believe should have been rated differently. I love reading all of your comments, so feel free to share them. Anyways, this has been 100% Hunter, and as always, I hope you follow your instincts and continue the hunt. Until next time, friends.